I had some thoughts that I wanted to share today. I think class is going to be a little bit more free form. I just have some ideas percolating in my mind. There's probably some structure to it. We'll see what happens. But right now, I've just got some notions, some thoughts. I guess they're probably a little bit somewhat disjointed. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. Everywhere you go in the world has a particular feel to it. I've traveled pretty extensively. I've been to 43 countries. I've traveled pretty extensively. Been around the world quite a few times. Mostly when I was younger. I don't travel much at all anymore. But each place you go to has a particular feel to it. Like rural Australia on the Gold Coast, where my wife's, was born and raised. It's big sky country, and rolling fields, and it's really it's really rural. There's plantations, and it's just a very big open feel. Australia is actually a very large country, and without a huge population. And then, there's India, which just has its own thing going on. I was traveling to India with a friend of mine who hadn't been in years. It's so funny. We were traveling from Singapore to India. He hadn't been to India in years. And if you've spent significant time in India, not with me, I usually have pretty good luck with people, but if you spent significant time in India, generally you have digestive issues. Usually in the form of, pretty intense diarrhea. Oftentimes amoebic dysentery is what's going on. There's other stuff you could get, giardia and a bunch of other more exotic variations, but usually people get amoebic dysentery, and it's quite hellish. I mean, you think you're going to die. It's so intense. You can, actually, from dehydration. You've had dysentery? It's intense. Bad dysentery? Okay. My friend was on the plane going to India, and just the excitement of going to India and the smells on the plane and just going into that place, he got so freaked out. He got like a relapse of dysentery, of diarrhea on the plane on the way there. And it doesn't make any sense because, it's from eating, there's bugs and all. People come from other countries, you hear they get bugs too, they get sick too, because they're not used to our bugs, we're not used to their bugs. But just the anticipation, excitement of it all, threw him into a multi-day bout of diarrhea. It was like some kind of homecoming. India's got its own feel. The whole country has a feel, a smell. But then if you look at our holy places, Puri, Mayapur, Vrindavan, they each have their own feel to them. And it's almost like going to a different country, each of our primary pilgrimage places. Of course, Badrinath has a whole nother thing going on. Even the various elevations in the Himalayas have a different feel to them as you're traveling up through the mountains. Every place has a feel to it. I'm from Southern California. I was born in Santa Monica. I spent years of my life living in India and living abroad. But at 48, at least, 38 or 40 of my 48 years I spent living in Southern California. And my childhood was all up in LA. Venice, Culver City, Westwood, Brentwood, Santa Monica, everything on the west side. Everything on the west side. And then the last 20 years, I've spent down here in Orange County, South Orange County, Laguna Beach. Long Beach has a whole different feel. I never came to Long Beach before. I came to Long Beach like a couple of times when I was a kid for something or other. But there was a reggae festival down here when I was 15. I came down to Long Beach for that. There was a protest I came down for. I think we threw tomatoes at some politicians. It's like a few things throughout the years. But, then I started coming to Long Beach maybe 10 years back or something like that. Southern California has a feel to it. It's buildings and palm trees with the sun in the background. If you look at the logo for my restaurant, my Ahimsa logo, it's the Long Beach skyline with the buildings that are native to Long Beach. But if I ever open up round 2 or round 3, I'll just switch the skyscape. I'll switch the buildings and have it be whatever city we're in. But there's the sun and the palm trees with the urban buildings. You follow? That's Southern California. You might think Miami's like that too. It's not. Miami's got a different feel. It's like Miami's got a little bit more of a Cuban feel to it. There's some other stuff going on. The wetness, the humidity. There's gangs, but it's not like LA. LA was the birthplace of the Crips and the Bloods. We are the original gangsters in Los Angeles. Just right down the road, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes from here. You roll up Atlantic. You roll up any of these streets, just go past the 405 and you're in the heart. That's like a concrete jungle. The palm trees are the jungle aspect, and then the concrete. And with the sun, And it doesn't feel subtropical at all. It's got a grittier feel to it. Do you guys know what I'm talking about in LA? It's different. It's special. I like LA. I feel comfortable here. I know the place. There's an author named, you must know, Charles Bukowski. You're like a big fan of his, right? I'm looking at you, Leela.
Oh, sorry.
You've read his stuff?
Not a long time, but when I was in college.
It's like right up your alley, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, he lived in Los Angeles most of his life, and he wrote about extensively alcohol and women and drugs and depression and stuff like that. That was kind of his scene. But it had a very Southern California feel because he loved the city of Los Angeles, wrote about it extensively. You familiar with Charles Bukowski?
Yeah.
You are? Okay. Yeah, Southern California feels like home to me. And when it's a particular look. It's like there's a bit of smog going on. There's palm trees, and there's buildings. There's concrete and palm trees and smog. That's Los Angeles, right? All over Southern California, really. That same. It's like rinse and repeat, You get that same vibe all over Southern California. Get that same thing going in San Clemente too. It's not even like palm trees are really native to this place either. It's all like imported. It's not even real. Palm trees don't grow here naturally. We're a chaparral, semi-arid, but we just truck in all the water we don't truck it in. We bring it in from the Colorado River. It's artificial, but somehow we chose that as the motif for the city of Los Angeles, and it's just it's almost inseparable. I was thinking about a verse in the Gita. I'll try to tie this together. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharma swanushtitat. Shreyan swadharma viguna. Viguna means badly, poorly, faultily. Viguna really means faulty. Shreyan, it's better to do faultily swadharma, your own dharma. Swa means your own dharma. Better to do your own dharma faultily. Paradharmat, than another's dharma, swanushtitat, like really well. Better to do your own dharma faultily than another's dharma very well. That verse actually comes up twice in the Gita. It actually comes up twice in the Gita. Which is unusual. There aren't a lot of verses that come up twice in the Gita. This is one of them. Better to do your own dharma faultily than another's perfectly or really well. I was reflecting on this verse on the way up. I was listening to Neil Young with my wife and kids on the way up. And Neil Young reminds me of my brother who passed away from a heroin overdose 7 years ago. We're rolling around to his birthday, so I start to think about him more around this time of year. And Neil Young reminds me of him because Neil Young was a junkie, was a heroin addict for many years, and a lot of his songs are permeated with that feel. And so it reminds me of my brother. Just like Southern California has a feel, Neil Young's music has a feel. I don't know how familiar you guys are with him. I've seen him in concert like 6 times. I've been to concerts since 1990. But, my childhood, I saw him 6 times in concert. I'm a fan. And his music, he has kind of a fragile voice, honestly. He has a fragile, and it's high. For a man's voice, it's very high. And he sings, really from the heart. And there's a certain vulnerability in the way he sings that's uncommon amongst musicians. He shows his country and Americana roots, and Anybody familiar with Neil Young as a musician? Like 4 people, 4 white people. Yeah, so it's like anyway. Southern California has a feel. Neil Young's music has a feel. When you're doing what you were put on this earth to do, that also has a feel. It's an unusual verse because if you can do another person's job perfectly, wouldn't that mean it was your job? You follow? It's almost like the verse is absurd on the surface, prima facie. If I'm doing my job and I'm doing it poorly, but I could do another's job perfectly. Wouldn't that mean that the other person's job is my job? You follow my doubt? I want to spend a little time with this verse. I'm headed somewhere. Mark Twain is famous for saying the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. He obviously believed in a telos, or a purpose, or a dharma, or a duty, that everyone was put on this earth to do something, to accomplish something. And then the goal of life is to figure out what that is and then do it. I think that's really the key to happiness, not giddy happiness. Giddy happiness is just as bad as freaking out for no reason. It's like it's shallow and it doesn't long endure. But real happiness comes from being a part of something bigger than yourself. And real happiness can endure even when you go through the inevitable difficulties that life has in store for you. In a lot of ways, most of what I do is try and explain to people their fundamental duty beyond this body, beyond this world. Your duty as a soul, your dharma as a soul, your basic relationship with divinity. And although there's infinite room for people to sculpt that and for it to be individual, because all of us are unique and we all have a unique relationship with divinity, there is a basic template. That's the great thing about religion. They offer you well thought out, at least ideally, they offer you well thought out, comprehensive, boilerplate answers for you to kind of color in. But they deal with the biggest questions of life. If you look at a given religion, a given theology, it's a set of answers to the biggest questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? What's the nature of divinity? Where's this world come from? What's the fundamental nature of this world? What's my fundamental relationship with this world? What's the world's relationship with divinity? God, self, world, and the lines of continuity. How's God related to the world? Was the world created from nothing? Is the world from Satan? Is the world divine? My relationship to the world. Is the world a dangerous place I got to get away from? I got to run away from? I got to kill myself piously as soon as possible to get back to heaven? Or is this was this world given to me to enjoy and I have dominion over everything? What's the nature of my relationship with this world? And then what's my relationship with divinity? It's the big questions of life. And it's not wrong to have clean answers. Like we learn math. Math is clean answers to basic questions about the fundamental nature of reality, and they got the answers right. And so, instead of trying to figure out mathematics all on your own through trial and error, which would take you unlimited lifetimes, to be able to stand on the shoulders of giants and get thousands of years of scientific inquiry distilled down, you get taught in a dozen years, and it's literally millions of years of experience that's been distilled down. So just because it's a template, just because somebody else thought of it before you, doesn't mean it's wrong. We got to learn to recognize truth appreciate truth and good answers and not feel like it's bad because we didn't make it up. You know, it's like I can't listen to that music because I didn't write it. Can't wear those clothes because I didn't make them. Can't drive down these streets because I didn't pave them. Can't have that haircut because some other person somewhere in the world has that haircut. It's like somehow we get over ourselves with everything, but then when it comes to philosophy, everybody thinks they're going to figure it all out for themselves from scratch. Like, give me a break. It's just like a combination, an incredible combination of ignorance and pride. It's like such an ugly mix. You know, it's like mixed stool and urine together. I'm like, what's that look like? It's ignorance and pride. So anyway, religion is a set of answers to these basic questions. It's a template. And it's good. You know, and obviously all being children of God and such, it would make sense that we would all have the same basic relationship, the same fundamental relationship with divinity. That makes sense. And so I do think there's room for these type of standard answers, standard ideas. And then, you know, depending on what you roll with, that's the tradition you're a part of. But it's, if you want to break it down, it's an attempt to answer some of the standard questions of life. Usually, while I'm trying to persuade somebody to appreciate the completeness and the superiority of our answers to those questions, persuading people isn't wrong. If you're not persuading people, then you're being persuaded. The world is the game of persuasion. Persuade somebody not to get in a fight with you. Persuade somebody to like open up the road to let you in. Persuade somebody to give you a deal on something you want to buy, to go into business with you, to teach you something, to take your classes. Persuade somebody to get healthy, to learn music. It's like we're constantly being persuaded and persuading. The lost art of rhetoric isn't actually lost. We just gave it a bad name, but everybody's still doing it anyway. And so when I'm trying to persuade somebody to appreciate the brilliance of the tradition that I represent, most of the time what I do is I dismiss material stuff, because in comparison to spiritual stuff, it's much less important, and we have a disjointed relationship with material things where they take up all of our time and attention, and spiritual stuff takes up next to nothing in terms of our time and attention. You'll work 10, 12 hours a day to turn a buck, but if people say, like, you should meditate for 2 hours a day, people are like, that's insane, that's like a cult, like, whoa. But you're like, hey, to explore your fundamental spiritual eternal nature as a conscious entity, you should put some real time into that every day, versus keeping body and soul together, which you should do, but you shouldn't like make it your whole life. People are like, that sounds kind of culty to me. You follow? But just the very notion of spirituality is that there's like, you are fundamentally much greater than this body. I was on Instagram today, because that's what I do with my free time. And some sponsored ad came up on my feed, and the guy was teaching a course on energy, and he was like, normally we teach people that they have a spirit inside their body, but the truth is that your body is inside your spirit. And I was like, dude, I don't even know what that means. Like, that statement sans context is actually meaningless. But I know what happened. The guy heard that, and like idiots who were like putting out his material heard that, and they're like, oh, that's sexy. Like, we'll put that in there, even though you don't really know what it means. Without like a significant amount of context, I don't even know what that statement means. Do you follow? Like, what's your conception of spirit versus body? You know what I mean? It's like, it's so nonsensical by itself, but they threw that in there without any context. Anyway, I don't know how I got into that.
Culty.
No, but I think what I was, huh?
Was there anything else on Instagram, or was that the thing from Instagram?
That's it. That's all I do all day. Watch that clip over and over again. I was just making the point that you've got these ideas, these notions about these big questions. You want to get answers to these questions, and so you foray out into the world of, potential answers, and you learn to weigh them. And some of the stuff that's out there is just drivel. People are persuading one another, and I thought of this persuasive quip, and I gave out a little commentary on it. Because I'm not such a hater, I'm going to comment on the post. And so, but I will comment on it at some other time. Most of the time, we dismiss. If you actually want to understand how my mind got there, I began talking about the nature of self versus the body. And I began to say that the body is less important than the self. And I remembered this quote this guy gave, which made no sense. And I just threw it out there for fun. That's how that happened. As I began to explore answers to these questions. And just the simple point I wanted to make was that if you do understand that you're the soul, you're the self, and you're not the body, you are a soul, you have a body, then naturally that realization would carry with it a larger investment of your time in self-realization and self-exploration compared to maintenance of the fallible, decrepit, decaying, dying body. Did you follow that? But we don't find that happens, even amongst people who profess to believe in spirituality, who are religious. We find that most of us we spend a ton of time with our bodily necessities and a comparatively insignificant amount of time thinking about the bigger topics and working on them. Did you guys follow that? So most of what I do is I tell people, don't be such a materialist. Don't get so wrapped up in materialism. Don't take it all so seriously. Make spiritual life your actual job, your actual passion, your actual career. And do whatever you're doing for money, but don't freak out about it. Did you follow that? But that's not quite the whole answer. You got to pick a place to live. You got to have some hobbies. You got to do something for money. You got to pursue some kind of education. You have to have some kind of style. You have to listen to some kind of music. You have to have some aesthetic that you cultivate about yourself. And when you, A, can explore who am I spiritually, fundamentally, permanently, forever, and also get comfortable with your personal aesthetic. And when I say aesthetic, I mean more than just what people traditionally mean. I mean your ethic and your aesthetic and your career and your style and your hobbies and everything else. You follow? I'm using that phrase as a catch-all for everything I said before. You actually got to do both. You got to be yourself. Figure out who you are. I was remembering when I was 15, I moved out of my house when I was 15. And I was living with friends in LA. What was that? I was in West LA, like straight West LA, like actually Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, but the west side. Not Westwood, not Santa Monica, but that space right in between them. was in a gang. My friend got shot to death. I was a cocaine addict. I sold drugs. I committed crimes. Nothing major, but I committed some crimes. I remember one day we were at an elder gang member's house. The gang I was part of had cliques, and different age groups had different cliques. It's kind of a thing that Mexican gangs do this. And so you'll have 8 or 9 different cliques within a gang, and those are all the different age groups within the gang. Do you follow that? So the elder members of the gang, who were in their 30s at that point, had done a hard time, and they were serious lifetime criminals. That's the rule. And then there were the juniors coming up. So I was 15, and I was white, so I was never really fully fledged in the gang. It was a Mexican gang. I was Güero, Blanco. I was the white kid in the gang. But whatever, they were my peeps. And I rolled with them, with guns in the car, and did stuff with them. So I was part of that tribe. But we were still staying at one elder gang member's apartment, and he was shooting up heroin. I'd never seen anybody shoot up heroin before. I was addicted to cocaine, and I'd sold drugs, but shooting heroin is no joke. You ever shoot heroin? Yeah, it's no joke. It's especially in the 80s when I was coming up, it's nowadays, a bunch of cool white chicks shoot heroin and videotape it and put it on Instagram or something like that. But it went through a trendy phase in the 90s. It was cool to shoot heroin, but when in the 80s it was gnarly. I mean, I think it still is. But we were hanging out with this guy, and he started shooting heroin. We spent the night at his house and hung out. But in the nighttime, as the night was winding down, he shot up as a way to cap off the night. So we were smoking weed and drinking, but he just right in front of us, just broke out his kit and injected heroin right in front of us. Did you follow that? I hadn't remembered that in it's got to be 30, 32, 33 years. I just remembered it. And I remember crashing on this floor and just being watching the dude shoot up and being whoa, that's kind of gnarly. You guys follow this? I've seen some stuff, huh? Yeah. I've seen a bunch of drive-bys. And I was in a drive-by, a couple of them, and I got shot. I'm not going to answer your question whether I was ever on the other end of a drive-by, but because I know you were wondering that. Got Mr. McCop in the back of the room. I have a sense of who I am. I have a sense of who I am both spiritually as well as materially. I have an aesthetic I'm comfortable with. And I also have religion. I got both. And they're actually both important. And although I spend a lot of time telling people, don't worry about the material stuff, get your spiritual life sorted, it's actually not quite that simple. You really need to do both. And so one way to interpret Krishna's statement is he's saying, get straight with your spirituality because that's your Dharma, but then your spirituality and everybody else will be the same, so that statement of do yours but not somebody else's would make sense. If you look at the context of when Krishna makes his statements, it's when he's talking about material duties, which means that Krishna does actually tackle material duties in the Gita. You follow? So I don't want to get into a major conversation, but I did think what I would, in terms of helping all of you guys go through an exploration of finding out your life purpose. But Nick hit me up today at 6 o'clock. He's like, hey, can we talk about my life purpose and my career? I'm like, dude, give me a break. I'm getting in the car, drive up to the program, back off. Are you kidding me? It's like kind of a mega conversation, you know? So that also, there's Neil Young, this, Southern California, I was watching the sun go down with the palm trees. And it all just kind of came together. And so I'm just sort of spinning you guys a yarn, taking you guys on a little bit of a, kind of just on a mental journey with me. Things I was thinking about. I have a sense of who I am. I mean, first of all, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Hare Krishna. By Krishna's grace, I'll die chanting Hare Krishna. I found the perfect tradition. It answers questions I didn't even know to ask. I find its answers to be fully satisfactory, head and shoulders above the rest. I got blessed. Like somebody dropped me into the Hare Krishnas, and I'm like, couldn't be happier. Never regretted it for a moment. So happy I became a monk, moved in the temple, spent a decade of my life doing that. Like it was the best thing I ever did with my life. I'm so happy with everything about my spiritual life. Just want to do more of it. It's in my bones, it's in my blood. I'm in it for life. I'd die for my tradition in a heartbeat 100 times over. I'm good with it. That's like, so on that side I've got that, and I'm like, I'm blessed. Then who am I? I'm like, I'm a foot soldier in a lot of ways. I met some astrologer. Every few years I'll have fun talking to an astrologer. I don't actually take astrology seriously at all. That's right, Em. But one time an astrologer told me, he was looking at my chart, Aries rising, I have an Aries rising. It's kind of a martial thing. And, like a Leo is more of a general. Aries is more of a foot soldier. It's funny because I am like a leader and I'm a priest. I got people under me, and I'm kind of more in the role of a leader. But I like to get in the mix. I have a martial personality. I definitely don't mind dying on my shield. I'm okay with violence. I'm okay with aggression. I prefer to be involved in violence because the pain of being cowardly is way more intense for me than the fear of losing an eye or even dying. That's who I am. I'm a soldier. I've got that nature. I'm not saying it's better than anything else, but that's just how I'm built. I want to be in the mix. And I'd rather put myself in harm's way, because the few times in my life where I've been cowardly, it was very, very difficult for me to forgive myself. And so I'd rather risk life and limb than live with that shame. Self-shame of having not stepped in where I should have. You follow? I'm a priest. I love worshiping the deity in the temple. I love caring for the deity. I love maintaining our institution. I love carrying the weight of my elders on my back so that the mission goes on and it lives another generation. Anything like vital, like anything, anything, the NAACP or our religion or whatever we're talking about, it only lasts one generation. If you don't pass it on from one generation to the next and somebody doesn't pick up the cross, it dies right there. I'm part of a movement, and that means I got to pick up the cross and keep walking, because my elders are going to pass away, and somebody's got to achieve excellence in our tradition, learn our theology, practice it, live it, and be able to communicate to the next generation down. We have to imbibe it and then be able to carry it forward. You follow? That's my purpose in life. If I die penniless and I achieve nothing else, if I can just pass on our tradition to the next generation and do my elders proud by doing that and on some level repay them for what they gave me, I'll die happy. Anonymous, infamous, penniless, it doesn't matter. I'm a manager. I like to control things. I like to tinker with things and make them work right. Not like items like a refrigerator. I suck at that stuff because my dad was really good at it, so I never had a chance to do it because he did everything. So I suck at that kind of stuff. Like all that manly stuff, I suck at. But I like to tinker with operations and systems and make them hum and make them work right. I like to control things and people. On a bad day, I like to control them, negatively and abusively. I don't have many bad days anymore. On a good day, and those good days are every day, I try to control things and manage things to help people, bring out the best in people, let people spread their own wings and fly and do something amazing. But I've had to learn that art. My nature is to manage things. So I've had to learn to manage things where it uplifts the people that I'm with and empowers them instead of keeps them down. That's been a major facet of my adulthood. You follow? Being an entrepreneur just goes along with my risk-taking, being my own boss, not being controlled, being in charge of my own destiny, personality. My personality, once I understand that, then I can look for jobs and career paths and opportunities that work with who I am and what I'm about. So for me, understanding who I am, what my aesthetic is, what my ethic is, what my basic kind of, and there's a whole downside like personality tests, like Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram. They put everybody in a box. They try to say, you got to be one of this or one of this. I prefer a more organic approach where I start to just understand myself. Or if I'm counseling somebody, understand them, what makes them tick. And then you look for jobs, you look for careers, you look for people, you look for places where you'll be happy. You guys follow this? So, we got a template, spirituality. Normally, most of the time, we say, hey, don't worry about the material stuff. Let's focus on this. And that's good because it's so underserved and underexplored. But we do have these bodies. We do have to live in the world. We do have to keep body and soul together. We do have to find a way to turn a buck. And so the best way to do that is to figure out who you are. What's your nature? What makes you tick? What kind of personality do you have? What's your mindset? What makes you thrive? What makes you get up and move? What inspires you? What do you like to do? I love helping people. I met somebody yesterday. They take care of people with Alzheimer's. And when I listened to them talk about it, they were really passionate about it. I would hate that job. I would hate that job. Like wiping somebody's butt and like all that kind of stuff, it would freak me out. It wouldn't work for me. And like old people in general, it's a little rough on me. My elders I'm cool with, but like random old people, not my jam. And like being with people who aren't mentally all there, man, there's like one kind of person I can't minister to, it's crazy people. I can deal with like the most sinful of sinful people, but like deceitful people and crazy people, like schizoaffective disorders, like where like where 1 + 1 = 8, like where there's that non sequiturness in their brain. I can't do it. I'm just not built for it because I have a very logical mind. I like order. You follow? Well, maybe I need to spend time in chaos. I don't know. I don't like stool. Do I need to roll around the stool? I don't like drinking toilet water. Should I go and do that? You know what I mean? I don't like drugs. Do I have to go and do a bunch of drugs? It's like there can be things that you don't like doing, and it's not that you need to go spend a bunch of time in that thing. Sometimes it's that's just not you. Sometimes you should just play your strengths instead of playing your weaknesses. We don't do as well when we play to our weaknesses. You got to shore them up. You got to make sure there's nothing that needs to be explored over there. You got to make sure you're not hiding from something you need to deal with. But for the most part, you should accentuate the positive. Generally, when people have a bad chart, they sell you gems. It's like the seedy underbelly of astrologers. It's like most astrologers are also really bad gemologists who are always trying to push gems on you. And there's two theories of gemology. One is you find a bad planet and you give them a gem that represents that bad planet and you equalize it. That's the bad notion. The other one is you find the good planets and you buy a gem that accentuates that good planet. We should find what we're good at and then get really good at it. Tidy up where we're weak, but spend most of our time doing what we're good at, what we're strong at, what's the zone for us, and really do something amazing with it. All of you are great at spirituality. Because you're a soul. You might not know it, but you're all great at spirituality. But then materially, we've got this particular psychosomatic nature, this psychophysical nature. And that's also important to do, to figure it out. I'm a counselor. I love counseling people. I'm a manager. I love managing things. I'm introverted. I don't like being in situations where I have to be too extroverted to make a buck. Sales sucks for me. I want to claw my eyes out every night when I get home from work. I shouldn't be involved in sales. You follow? We got to figure this stuff out. More than what career you should have, you should figure out who you are, what makes you tick. And those two things together make a good life. I'm a Southern California boy. Specifically LA. I'm in Orange County. I'm in Laguna Beach, but I feel like I'm from LA. You know? I'm like all these pussies from Orange County. You know what I mean? I've got that LA in my bones. I grew up in LA. I spent some years on the streets. It's like it's in my bones now. I like to fight. I need to do physical activity. I need to wrestle on the regular. I need to box on the regular. I need to move some iron. It makes me feel vital. Otherwise, I start to feel like the pussy. I got to be like, Habib Nurmagomedov's dad, who's kind of probably done more to stop terrorism in the world than anybody else. He's in Dagestan, the country with the most terrorist activity in the world. And he's a sports coach who teaches kids how to wrestle. And so it's like that's the alternative. You either go radicalize Islam or you get into sports. That's like your two ways out of Dagestan. You follow? So anyway, he's on the sports side. Enough that a bunch of Muslim extremists don't like him. He passed away recently. And he was the coach and the father of one of the greatest combat sports athletes in the history of the world, Habib Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov is actually how you pronounce it. Anyway, so he said, all men, yeah, it's a patriarchal statement. Deal with it. It's a reality. And so there it is. You know why? Because men have upper body strength that women don't have. Because we can't lactate. It's weird. There's a template for the body. Why do we even have nipples? What's the purpose of men having nipples? Do you know why? You know why men have nipples? The stuff I think about, right? Men have nipples because there's one template for the body. And that template has to include mammary glands and nipples because half of us need to lactate. And you can't change your body that much post-birth. So everybody has to be made with nipples. You follow? The genitals are so different, right? But they're actually not. One just goes out and one grows in. Other than that, the genitals are the same. They have all the same basic features, but one's an innie and one's an outie. One's an outie and one's an innie. You follow? That, and that has to happen like in the womb, but the nipples and the breasts, they're common. So men have, and so what happens to us after we get our breasts? Like we can't use because we can't lactate because we suck like that. What do? We get a little upper body strength. A lot of upper body strength. Like I can bang out 60 push-ups. Like right now, one set, no problem. Women who can bang out 60 push-ups, forget about it, man. What are we talking about? Like top CrossFit athletes, even then, it's like questionable. That's like, they can squat a ton. They can deadlift a ton. But when it comes down to doing push-ups, it's tough. That shoulder strength, the pec muscles, especially when you've got there's so many, like a really in shape guy has like 10, 11% body fat. A really in shape woman has 1.5 times that, 15, 16% body fat, because the extra 5% is breast material. Anyway, it's a Muslim I'm quoting anyway, and so they're like famous for being misogynistic. So he said all men must prepare at all times for war. Even in times of peace, all men should be preparing for war. Like that makes sense to me. That works for me. Like that resonates with me. This is my nature. I'll be an old man, I'll be weak, maybe I'll be more androgynous when I get older. Probably, my testosterone levels will go down. But they're already plummeting yearly, if you look at the statistics, it's like it's all downhill from here. But I understand who I am. First and foremost, I'm a Hare Krishna. And I'm also a soldier. And I'm logical. And I like to manage. And I don't like to be controlled. I like to serve my elders, though, and do them proud. And so I need to construct a life where I make money in a way that doesn't stop me from doing the thing which satisfies me the most, which is carry our tradition forward to the next generation. All of you get that responsibility. That's a shared one. All of you got to get this in your bones. All of you have to carry the torch forward. But then in terms of like what you do for money and and what your aesthetic is, the kind of people you want to hang out with, and the kind of person you are, that stuff is actually important to discover too. You follow? So, I'm from Los Angeles. You follow? And I'm a bit of a hard man. That's just how I grew up. And I like to manage things. And I have a lot of empathy for people who've been through tough times. And I've been through my own tough times. Instead of running away from the death of my brother and the fact, he OD'd on heroin. He shot up heroin and OD'd. But really, crack killed him. He wasn't a heroin addict. He was a crack addict. And the come down from crack is so horrible. It's so awful that smart crack addicts buy a little dime bag of heroin. That way when they've run out of money and there's no way for them to do any crimes to get more, they shoot that heroin and wake up 8 hours later and it's taking the edge off. You follow? So he died up in LA. He lived and died up in LA a few years ago. And He died of a heroin overdose, but he wasn't really a junkie. He was actually a cocaine addict. And so like I look at my life, and I carry some sadness for that. I carry some sadness because, you know what my father said to me? Right after my little brother's, my baby brother's funeral? He said to me, you know, I always thought you were going to be the one to pull him out of it and get him sober. You guys catch that? My old man said to me, I always thought you were going to be the one to save Mark, to pull him out of it and get him sober. That's heavy, right? My older brother's like, Dad's such a jerk. He used a different word besides jerk that I'm not going to say because I don't want to be rude. But he made this point to me, Dad's such a jerk, I can't believe he talked to you like that. Talk about like, it's like so like abusive to tell you. Like at the funeral, you know what I mean? My father says that to me, like, hey, carry the weight of your little brother's death for the rest of your life. And of course it's like, are you kidding me? You're his father, for crying out loud. And you're putting that weight on me? Like, you follow? You know what? I'm cool with it. He's right. My parents don't understand drug addiction. I do. They don't understand cocaine addiction specifically. I do. They don't deal with addicts all the time. I do. They don't get people sober. I do. I should have done more for them. I don't mind feeling remorseful for the mistakes I've made in life by not being there. And immature, foolish people want to jump in and preach to me and tell me, no, you need to forgive yourself, this or that. Actually, I don't need to do anything. Just shut up and keep your opinion to yourself. I didn't ask you. That's number one. It's amazing how people want to like write into you and like become your therapist. I'm cool with this. My job is to care for people. My job is to help people. I should have helped my baby brother. I should have done more for him. And I didn't. I might not be able to save him, but I could have done a lot more than what I did. And I feel chastened and sharpened by that remorse because it makes me do better the next time. And I'm grown up enough that I can own my mistakes, carry them with me, and not have them break me. I look at my aesthetic, I look at my nature, I look at my ability to carry remorse, I look at what's happened in my life, my history, and it all makes sense. And you know, now I'm in my late 40s, and I'm cool with it all. I'm okay with it. I know who I am. And so I was thinking about Southern California, and I was thinking about my baby brother, and the kind of music I grew up with, and my regrets, and my history, and the things I've seen and been through, and my nature, and my spirituality, and the stuff that's specific to me, and the stuff that's general and generic for everybody. And I just kind of thought about these things while I was driving up, and I wanted to share them with all of you. And so I guess, and I thought of a verse. Shreya Swadharma Vigunat. Better to do your own Dharma faultily. The thing is this. Better to live your own life authentically, even if it's not all rainbows and unicorns, than to live a fake life perfectly, but it's not actually you. You follow? And so, self-discovery involves also becoming comfortable with who you are. In this world, what you've been through, what you've seen, what you've experienced. And all that stuff coalesces and kind of makes you who you are materially. And there's still room in that to explore your spirituality, which oftentimes is a lot more generic. Like I can say real comfortably, all of you have to carry the message forward. All of you should get in on this action. But over here, this side of my personality, it's not necessarily the same. Some people are like, oh, I hate the jungle. I like to be out in the concrete jungle. I like to be out in nature. I like nature too. But I feel settled when I'm in LA. You know what I'm talking about? Some people aren't like that. Some people feel the most at home when they're in the country. And I start to get a little spun. You put me in the country too long, I'm like, hey, there's not enough noise going on. I feel like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is about to happen or something like that. All right. Anyway, that's my yarn. If you joined us on Instagram, thank you very much. If you guys are on Facebook, you want to hang out for another minute. Gopal, can you hear me? Just say yes if you can.